I got the news that my wife and her lover had been in a car accident, smashed off a mountainside by a truck while having sex in the back seat of a car out in the countryside. The doctor said if I wanted to save her leg, I'd better come up with $300,000 for emergency surgery, fast. I broke down, hysterical. My wife is the most celebrated dancer in the city, her legs are everything. If she loses them, she might as well be dead. So please, I choked out between sobs, when you amputate, be gentle, will you? The moment I arrived at the hospital, I wiped the smile off my face from the drive over. Couldn't risk getting sloppy now. I rushed into the room, dropped to my knees at her bedside, and cried like a man whose world had just shattered. Anna, what were you thinking? If you were gonna cheat, at least pick a safer place. It's not like I would have stopped you. All I've ever wanted was for you to be safe, nothing else. Please don't go thinking you owe me anything, or that you have to die to make it right. Even the nurse standing nearby looked moved, probably hadn't seen devotion like this before. Then the doctor pulled me aside, expression grave. Hurry up and pay for the surgery, we can still save her leg. I sprang to my feet. Yes. I will ask her mother for the surgery fee. I dialed my mother-in-law. Ma. I need you to wire me $300,000, Anna needs surgery. It's urgent. Surgery for what? You think I'm an idiot? I wouldn't give you $10, let alone $300,000. Don't even think about it, get lost. But it's real, she's seriously. Bullshit. Her voice blasted through the speakerphone, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear, especially over the background noise of her slamming down a card in the middle of what sounded like a poker game. Then came the sharp, final beep of a disconnected call. I struggled to keep a straight face, fighting back a grin, and turned helplessly toward the doctor. I don't have the money. My wife loved those legs more than anything. So, when you amputate, just go easy, all right? The doctor stared at me, then nodded toward the other bed. What about him? Do we save the guy she was with? Of course save him. I cried, wiping away a tear. My wife likes that man. You can always get a prosthetic leg, but if he dies, he's gone for good. You have to save him. Then I composed myself and added sincerely, but, technically, I'm not even her husband anymore. I don't think I'm legally qualified to approve this surgery, am I? The doctor gave me a look, then turned and rushed Anna into the emergency room. One of the nurses shot me a sympathetic glance before following after them. As soon as the door closed behind them, I pulled out my phone and sent a message to my father-in-law. Anna's leg is done for. Her mom refused to pay for the surgery. By the time my mother-in-law arrived at the hospital, Anna had already been wheeled out of surgery. Anna. My poor baby, what happened to you? Shoo, Mom, I said softly. She just came out of surgery, raising your voice like that isn't good for her recovery. She looked up and locked eyes with me, and in an instant, her gaze turned venomous. Why couldn't it be you who died in that car accident? You've got the nerve to stand here like nothing happened? Everything that's happened to Anna is because she married a useless loser like you. Don't you always say you are capable, come up with the money quickly so she can get proper treatment. I held up my hands. Mom, I already asked you for help. You refused. She froze for half a second, then exploded, spitting fury as she lunged at me. Lies. Every word out of your mouth is a damn lie. Before she could say more, I calmly played the phone recording for everyone to hear. Ma, I need money for Anna's surgery. I don't believe it. A rare silence fell across the emergency room lobby. Mom, I said evenly, after my business failed, you took every cent we had. I had nothing left to save her with. What was I supposed to do? Oh, so now you're blaming me? I told you from the start. You did this on purpose, didn't you? Her face turned crimson with rage. She raised her clawed hands, ready to scratch my face, but two sharp-eyed nurses stepped in just in time and pulled her back. Ma'am, this is a hospital, one of them snapped, clearly annoyed. Can you keep it down? The patient needs rest, not a circus. Thanks to my earlier heart-wrenching performance, those two nurses were practically smitten with me by now. They looked at me like I was some tragic hero stuck in the wrong marriage. Seeing them defend me only made my mother-in-law more furious. What, are you two his side chicks now? Is that why you're taking his side? Have you no shame? Excuse me, one nurse shot back. Who are you calling shameless? Say that again. They were seconds away from a full-on fight when a weak voice came from the hospital bed. Mom. Anna was awake. My mother-in-law rushed to the bedside and clutched Anna's hand. "Sweetheart, how are you feeling? Does it still hurt? I'm so sorry I got here late." Tears streamed down her face, but her grief quickly turned into fury as she spun toward me. "This is all your fault. You insisted on marrying this worthless man. If he hadn't ruined his business and lost the car, would you have needed to take a rideshare just to get to your student's house for a lesson?" "My student." "Wait." Anna's face suddenly turned pale. "Henry. What about Henry? Is he okay? Henry?" Her mother looked confused. I stepped in helpfully. "You know, Henry, the one driving her to that lesson. I heard he got pulled from the car without much trouble. Probably because neither of them had any clothes on, it made it easier to carry them out." "You." My mother-in-law's hand trembled with rage, pointing at me like a dagger. "How dare you humiliate my daughter like that? You filthy liar. I'll rip your damn mouth off." "Enough." Anna suddenly cried, struggling to sit up. "I need to see Henry." She threw back the blanket in a panic, only to freeze. There was nothing beneath it. "My legs. Where are my legs?" The scream that tore from her throat was raw and piercing, filled with a kind of pain that shattered the air in the room. I covered my face with my hands, not in grief, but to hide the smile tugging at my lips. "Where are my legs?" Anna shrieked again, her voice spiraling into hysteria. My mother-in-law staggered to the bed, frantically patting at the sheets, as if by some miracle the legs might still be hiding somewhere. Anna began hurling flower vases and whatever else she could grab. The room turned chaotic. "I knew it. It was you, you bastard. You did this to her." Anna's bloodshot eyes locked on me. I could see it in her face, she suspected that I was taking revenge on her. I raised my hands quickly. "Anna, come on. I told your mom everything before the surgery. The doctors heard it too. You know better than anyone what our finances look like. You and your mom were the ones who said I wasn't cut out to run a business. You took control of every cent we had, and gave it all to her to manage. That surgery would cost $300,000, and it had to be paid up front. I had no choice but to ask your mom. She said no. Not me, her. I couldn't save you." And just like that, I replayed the call again. "Ma, Anna needs surgery money." "I don't believe it." The sound echoed in the room like a death knell. Anna's face darkened, her eyes slowly turning to her mother with growing clarity and disbelief. Anyone could tell, her mother hadn't been protecting her money. She'd been hoarding it for her own entertainment, gambling and playing cards while Anna missed the only window to save her legs. Her mother collapsed to her knees, sobbing. "Anna. You're my daughter, how could I not save you? It's your husband, he tricked us, both of us. He didn't explain it right." "Enough." Anna's whole body shook with rage. She pointed a trembling finger. "Get out. Anna, how can you talk to your own mother like that?" Just then, the door flew open and her father rushed in, panting, sweat beading on his forehead. "Anna." He froze when he saw the empty space beneath the blanket, her pants legs now hanging limp. For a long second, he just stared. This was the daughter he'd boasted about for years, how talented she was, how many awards she'd won, how everyone in town tried to bribe him just to get their kids into her dance class. His cushy retirement, his social standing, his pride, everything had been built on the legs she'd danced on. And now, it was all gone. "All gone," he murmured, almost to himself. "It's all over. You're finally here." My mother-in-law whirled toward him, pointing at me. "Do something. Our son-in-law is trying to destroy this family." A thunderous slap echoed through the room. Her husband had struck her across the face, clean, hard, and without hesitation. "My name is George. I used to run a business and was one of those young entrepreneurs, ambitious, sharp, successful before 30. I met Anna 5 years ago at a business dinner. She was still in college back then, while I was already a middle school dropout who'd hustled my way up from the bottom. A girl like her, educated, elegant, stunning, was the kind of woman I had no defense against. I fell deeply in love with her. For a long time, I believed she was the most talented, gentle, and pure soul I had ever known. I pursued her with everything I had. Her family didn't support her dream of going to an arts academy. They only cared about putting her younger brother through school. The night she was forced to drop out, she came to me in tears. We drank, we talked, and, well, one thing led to another. That night changed everything. From then on, I was all in that. I paid her tuition, supported her every step of the way. She didn't disappoint. One award after another, and by the time she graduated, she was already being recognized as a top-tier dance instructor. Eventually, she married me. It felt like a natural progression. I thought I had won the jackpot. I used to think her parents were just petty and calculating. I tolerated them for Anna's sake. I thought she was the only one worth anything in that family. But it turns out, she was the one hiding the deepest filth. She was never the innocent woman I thought she was. She was a master manipulator. When my company hit a rough patch, our competitors buried us under pressure. I couldn't understand why the industry suddenly turned on me. Until one night, a drunken executive let something slip. "You want to know why no one's doing business with you anymore?" he slurred. "Because you married a mistress who is a high-ranking government official." That's when the cracks started to show. That night, I checked her phone, and my world collapsed. She wasn't just cheating. She was juggling multiple men behind my back. One of them was her own student. She'd been sending him explicit photos and videos, unprovoked. He was obsessed with her. Those tutoring sessions at his place? Nothing but a front for their affair. She even brought whips and other toys with her. Things she never once dared bring into our bedroom. She'd shown a side of herself I had never seen, and never would have imagined. Furious, I was ready to confront her the next day. She said she was heading to her student's place again. I was about to catch her red-handed, until the hospital called. "Bitch! This is all your fault," my father-in-law roared at his wife, his face twisted with fury. She stumbled back, dazed from the slap, and collapsed to the floor, wailing. "I can't take this anymore." Truth was, she'd always been a small-minded, loud-mouthed woman with no class. Every time something went wrong, she turned to shrieking and rolling on the floor like a sideshow. "How the hell did this accident even happen?" he shouted again, his tone tight with panic and rage. "The car that jerk was driving? You lost your leg, fine, but I swear I'll go snap his damn arm right now." "Exactly, Anna," his wife jumped in, suddenly wiping her tears and scrambling back to her feet. "Tell us who was driving. We'll make them pay." Of course. The smell of compensation money was enough to dry her tears. I looked at Anna, whose face was flushed with embarrassment. She couldn't even get the words out. I clapped my hands slowly, enjoying the show. "Well," I said, smiling coldly, "since Anna's not ready to tell you, then let me say. Mom, Dad, you both know how dedicated Anna is as a teacher. She's always gone above and beyond to care for her students, even down to the smallest detail. With a teacher so nurturing, so selfless, how could something like this happen?" I said with a sigh. My father-in-law waved his hand, impatient. "Cut the crap and get to the point." I paused, then furrowed my brow, pretending to struggle with my emotions. "That was the point, Dad. She was caring for her student so deeply that it ended with the two of them in a car, clothes off, engaging in some very intimate tutoring. That's dedication, isn't it?" "What the hell did you just say?" he barked, his eyes bulging with rage. "You're accusing our Anna of sleeping with that student? Say that again and I'll kill you." He lunged at me with a raised fist, but I sidestepped easily. He stumbled, nearly crashing into the hospital bed. "He's been spouting nonsense from the start," my mother-in-law shrieked. "He's just bitter because Anna's doing better than him now. She's successful, she's well-known, and he can't stand it. A toad like him was lucky to land a swan like our daughter." "That's right. I raised that girl, I know her. Anna's the most innocent, pure-hearted girl in the world. If she ever did something like that, I swear I'll jump out that window right now." Their fury boiled over, completely convinced I was just a spiteful bastard trying to drag their daughter through the mud. Which made sense. They'd never treated Anna like a daughter anyway. Her brother, Nate, was always their priority. Even though he got kicked out of college for fighting. And now, all three of them, Anna, her parents, and that good-for-nothing brother, were living off Anna's income. Anna, unfortunately, cared too much about appearances. No matter how they treated her, she always gave in, always supported them. Back when my business was thriving, I turned a blind eye. But after it crashed, everything changed. Nate, who used to greet me at the door and offer to park my car, now acted like I was some freeloading parasite whenever I came over for dinner, throwing snide, passive-aggressive remarks like it was his job. "Who's Anna?" Just as the shouting reached a boiling point, two police officers walked in. "There. That's the man," my mother-in-law cried, pointing a trembling finger at me. Arrest him. He's the one who ruined my daughter's life, he's the reason she lost her leg. The officers didn't even glance in her direction. Instead, they walked straight to Anna's bedside and pulled out a few printed photos. "Ma'am," one of them said calmly, "is that you in the photo?" The room fell into a stunned silence. The image, captured by a traffic surveillance camera near a rural intersection, clearly shows two people having sex in the back seat of a car. One image, lit perfectly by a truck's high-beam headlights, captured both faces in crystal clarity, eyes wide, mouths open in panic just moments before the crash. And the woman in those images, unmistakably, was Anna. As for the man, it was none other than Henry, her student. But not just any student. Henry was the son of Brian, the same Brian who worked in local government, powerful and well-connected. And as far as I knew, Anna had a little history with Brian too. The same father-in-law who'd just vowed to throw himself out the window if Anna was ever caught cheating was now stone silent. "This is Anna," my mother-in-law stammered, her voice cracking. Before she could say another word, smack, another sharp slap across her face. "Shut up," he barked, his face flushed deep red as he turned away, unable to even look at the photos again. He never thought he'd live to witness his own daughter's scandal firsthand. Wasn't this the daughter they swore was pure and virtuous? Well then, open your damn eyes and take a good look. The cops weren't interested in giving them time to stew in shame. Their tone turned colder, more pressing. "Yes or no?" one of them asked again. Anna's parents both turned to her. Anna clenched her jaw, and after a long moment, she finally nodded. "Yes. It's me. Dad," I said casually, walking over to the window and slowly pulling it open. "Still planning on keeping your word from earlier?" He was shaking now, lips twitching, pointing at me with a trembling finger but unable to form a single coherent sentence. Just sputtering out, you. "I told you," her mother snapped, desperately trying to shift the blame. "I knew my daughter wouldn't amount to anything. I still have to rely on my son." Now it was Anna's turn to explode. She turned on her mother with a fury that had clearly been building for years. "Oh, but when you were living off the money I earned, shopping, playing your little games, where was all that talk about me being worthless then? And when I was begging for money for surgery, where the hell were you? I was helping your brother babysit his kid. I just played a little cards on the side, how could you blame me for that? You're the reason I lost my leg." Anna screamed, her face twisted in pain and rage. "Now the whole damn family can starve. If I die, you all die with me. What do you mean I'm the reason? You never listened to me anyway," her mother shot back, indignant. "If you'd listened and never married George, you wouldn't be in this mess." "She's right," her father chimed in. "You're already married, you're not even part of this family anymore. You screw up, and now somehow it's our fault." "Yeah," I said with a dry laugh. "So let me get this straight, she cheats on me with a student, and somehow that's my fault?" "Oh please," I added, turning to her father with a mocking smile. "Didn't Anna used to tell me how wild you were in your younger days? Out all night, sneaking around, never coming home till morning. Guess it runs in the family, huh?" He looked like he'd swallowed a wasp. Out of arguments, her mother suddenly turned on the hospital instead. "This hospital's a damn scam. What kind of place cuts off a leg so easily? I'm suing every last one of you." Having lost the argument with me, she was now trying to save face by picking a fight with the doctors. But the staff had seen and heard enough. The nurses exchanged glances filled with thinly veiled contempt, and one of them quietly wheeled a cart out of the room, clearly done with this circus. The doctor, expression cold and unimpressed, finally spoke. "You want to sue? Go ahead. This hospital has nothing to hide. But if you go that route, we'll be transferring your daughter to another facility immediately. Just know, changing hospitals mid-treatment will seriously affect her recovery. Increased scarring, higher risk of infection, and likely ulcerations. But, your call." The next few days, I was the one taking care of Anna. She was unbearable. Losing her leg had turned her into a ticking time bomb, snapping at everything, lashing out at everyone. When I tried to help her take her meds, she slapped my hand away and snapped through gritted teeth. "Get out of my sight, you useless piece of trash." I didn't say a word. Just stared at her. Anna didn't show the slightest hint of guilt. In her mind, everything her mother had said made perfect sense, everything that had happened to her was somehow my fault. "If you weren't so damn incompetent, if you hadn't run your company into the ground, would I have had to go to Brian and beg him to give you another shot? Everything I did for you. And you still have the nerve to glare at me? You really think I wanted to marry you? I must have been out of my mind. She conveniently forgot the part where she climbed into Brian's bed on her own, and when Brian inevitably tossed her aside, it was his wife who gave her a brutal reality check. I was the one who picked her up off the floor, who stood by her when no one else would, who burned bridges with Brian to protect her. That's what tanked my career. That's what buried my business. But now, she had the audacity to pin it all on me. Back then, I adored her, put her on a pedestal, let her step on my shoulders just so she could reach higher. Now, she was nothing to me. Just a bitter, broken woman who still thought she had power over me. I raised my hand and slapped her across the face. She froze. Shocked. Eyes wide, voice trembling. You hit me? George, you hit a woman? Her scream turned hysterical. Somebody help. He's hitting me. But no one came. Everyone in the hospital already knew her reputation. Her whole family bid at anyone they could sink their teeth into, no one wanted to get involved with their mess. And frankly, no one felt sorry for her anymore. She brought this on herself. If you don't want to take your meds, fine, I said coldly. You're the one who'll end up with infected scars and ulcers, not me. She glared at me, seething. In a few days, you'll be in a wheelchair starting physical therapy. Compared to that, this slap is nothing. Anna clawed at the sheets, fuming. Just then, her mother barged in. Mom. He hit me, she wailed, as if she'd just spotted a lifeline. Before her mother could even open her mouth, I chuckled. Wow, Nate must have some free time, huh? Letting you leave the house again? Oh, speaking of which, Nate's kid must be close to a year old now, right? I've been meaning to check in. I'll give him a call, see what he needs. I'll send over a few things, maybe you can take them back with you. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. Her mother's face went pale. What are you trying to say? You think I'm scared of my own son? Before she could finish the sentence, Nate himself walked into the room. Mom, the baby just threw up again. You need to get back, my wife can't handle him on her own. You've got to be kidding me. Anna snapped. I lost my leg and you're talking about some baby spit up? What the hell does that have to do with me? Nate shrugged. You've still got your arms, don't you? And George is here. You don't need two people to babysit you. That was that. Ever since Anna lost the one thing that brought in money, her legs, her father hadn't shown his face again. He'd only come that first day, then disappeared. Said he didn't want to get involved, claimed he was keeping a low profile. Her mother, meanwhile, had been stuck babysitting for Nate ever since. He didn't care about his sister at all. Never had. She was just a cash machine to him, a tool. Now that she was no longer useful, he didn't even bother to pretend. After pulling his mother out the door, Nate didn't look back. I turned to Anna and said casually, "Oh, by the way, Henry stopped by yesterday." Her expression shifted in an instant. The rage melted away, replaced with a strange, almost shy smile. Really? What did he say? I smirked. He said you should fully cooperate with the police. Just answer everything they ask, truthfully. I will. Of course I will, she said quickly, nodding like a teenager with a crush. Did he say, when he's coming back to visit me? I placed the cup down on the bedside table and glanced out the window, the sky streaked with fading light. Soon, I said slowly. Very soon. You'll see him again, real soon. So all you need to do is sign right here, the officer said, handing over the legal resolution. Anna didn't ask a single question. She signed her name without hesitation. I walked the officers out politely, like a good host. As soon as I stepped back into the room, Anna started complaining again. This water's cold. George, I told you I want warm water, go boil it, now. God, you're impossible. I didn't even bother arguing. I just picked up the cup of cold water and splashed it straight into her face. George. Are you out of your mind? Oh, stop screaming, I snapped. You lost a leg, not your lungs. Enough with the drama. I didn't care how she lashed out after I walked out. I had more entertaining things to tend to, her lovely family, for instance. By the time I arrived at her parents' house, chaos had already erupted. She just pops out a kid and suddenly I have to do everything, her daughter-in-law was shouting. Come on, it's just a few diapers, her mother snapped back. I knocked on the door, cutting through the argument. Hey, Mom, Dad. The police need to speak with you. What now? Her mother grumbled, clearly annoyed. Good afternoon, the officer said as he stepped in. This house belongs to Ms. Anna, correct? Yes, so, her mother replied, eyes narrowing. The officer pulled out the signed paperwork. Ms. Anna has been charged with reckless driving and destruction of public property. Based on Henry's statement, she and the driver were found to be primarily responsible and are liable for all damages. Lump sum $800,000. Her assets and liquid funds are now being seized to offset the debt. We need your cooperation during the proceedings. $800,000, her mother gasped, clutching her chest. That whore's in trouble and now you're trying to take our house? Nate's wife shrieked. She turned on me immediately. And what about you, George? Not a single cent from you, but now we have to pay. I sighed, putting on my most innocent face. You must be mistaken. That house, legally, it belongs to Anna. It was supposed to be a gift for Nate when he got married. Your family said no wedding unless there was a house, remember? So we offered up one of our properties. Your mom said, just borrow it for now. But technically, it's Anna's asset. Now that she's liable, that house is part of the debt settlement. Besides, I added with a shrug, my company's already filed for bankruptcy. The bank's well aware I've got nothing left. Anna's assets are the only ones they can touch. Nate's wife just stood there, stunned, processing the betrayal. And then she snapped. She turned on Nate and clawed at his face, screeching, "You lying bastard. Your whole family's a bunch of scammers. You tricked me into marrying you, made me serve your parents like a maid, and now I find out the house isn't even yours? You crazy woman. That house was always meant to be mine. It was Mom's idea anyway, go yell at her." But it was too late. Nate's wife grabbed a baby bottle and hurled it across the room. It struck her mother-in-law square in the head, hard enough to draw blood. I gave you a grandchild, and this is how you repay me? Your daughter's naked affair is all over the news, everyone's seen those photos. I've been walking around town with my face covered in shame. I'm done. I'm out of this hellhole. I'm divorcing you. She snatched up the baby and stormed out the door. Her mother stood there stunned for half a second, then, realizing her grandson was leaving, she rushed forward, blood still running down her forehead, and dropped to her knees begging her not to go. Please. Don't leave, don't take the baby. Get your filthy hands off me, you lying snake. Nate's wife shouted, shoving her aside. My mother-in-law watched in stunned silence as her grandson disappeared down the street in her daughter-in-law's arms. Nate finally snapped out of it and bolted after his wife, leaving his mother alone and frantic. She turned to the officers in a panic. Please. This is the only house we have, don't kick us out. The officer remained firm. Ms. Anna already signed the forfeiture documents. This property no longer belongs to you. You need to vacate immediately. Refusal to comply will be considered obstruction of law enforcement. When begging the officers didn't work, she turned to me, eyes glistening, voice suddenly sweet and pleading. George, you know you've always been like a son to me. I've always cared for you the most. Please, just talk to them for us. Anna's already lost her leg. If she loses this house too, how is she supposed to survive after she gets out of the hospital? I sighed dramatically, shaking my head. Mom, money can always be earned again. But let's be honest, this all happened because Anna was out fooling around with her student. And on top of that, she trashed public property in the park. It's hard to justify. I gave her a look of mock regret, but inside, I was enjoying every second of this. She stood there, completely lost. With her husband avoiding the house out of shame and Nate chasing after his collapsing marriage, the old woman, once so domineering, suddenly seemed powerless. Seeing that the timing was perfect, I gave a discreet signal to the officers. Would you mind giving us a few minutes alone? I'd like to talk to her privately. They nodded and stepped aside. I gently pulled her toward the side of the yard and dropped my voice. Mom, look, I might have a workaround. If you hand over whatever cash you have now, I can try to pull some strings. Maybe smooth things over a bit, see if we can keep the house from being taken, at least reduce the damages. That way, you and the family can still stay here. Maybe even get Nate's wife and the baby back. Her eyes lit up with hope. You really think that's possible? Of course, I said with a reassuring smile. Don't forget, I used to be a big shot. I still know people. But you know how things are now, I don't have any money myself anymore. You've got it all. I couldn't even afford to help Anna if I wanted to. She didn't hesitate another second. She rushed back inside, rummaged through her drawers, and brought me her bank card. I thanked her with a look of solemn gratitude, then turned and walked out with the officers. Thanks again, I said to the lead officer as we stepped off the property. Really appreciate you working with me on this. Here's a little something as a token of my appreciation. George, he said, waving it off. You don't need to do that. If it weren't for your help back in the day, I wouldn't even be standing here. It's nothing. Honestly, this was going to be executed either way. I just thought I'd give you a heads up out of respect. He paused for a moment, then added, but listen, you really should file for divorce now. That way, you'll still be entitled to half the house when the division of assets goes through. After he left, I slipped the bank card into my pocket, the weight of it feeling almost poetic. I took out my phone and dialed. Hello? Henry? It's me, Anna's husband. When I got back to the hospital, Anna was busy yelling at one of the nurses. Are you blind or just stupid? I told you it hurts, why the hell are you still grabbing me like that? I'm filing a formal complaint against this hospital. The young nurse spotted me entering and quickly made her exit. As she passed, she leaned in and whispered, she's in one of those moods again, mean as hell today. The second Anna saw us exchanging even the briefest words, her face twisted with fury. She tried to lurch up from her wheelchair. You bitch. Trying to seduce my husband? I'll kill you. I quickly nudged the nurse toward the hallway and quietly instructed her, whatever noise you hear in the next few minutes, just ignore it. She nodded quickly and disappeared. I shut the door behind her and turned toward Anna, who had just toppled from her wheelchair and lay struggling on the floor. Well, she snapped. Are you just going to stand there? Can't you see I fell? Get over here and help me up. I walked over slowly and dropped a folder in front of her. Sign this. What? I pulled out a pen and tapped the papers in front of her, divorce papers. I said, sign it. Her expression twisted. You want a divorce? Are you serious? After all that begging you did to get me to marry you, and now you want to walk away just because I lost a leg? You think this is over just like that? This is your fault. You really are something, I said, shaking my head. Spoiled to the bone, always were. Anna braced herself and pushed up on her arms. I'm not signing anything. Don't think I don't see what's going on here. You've been cozying up to that nurse, haven't you? Do you think you could replace me with someone younger? Dream on. I'm not giving up my spot for some bitch. If you think I'll let her win, you've got another thing coming. Her eyes burned with hatred. I just looked at her, amused. Where have I heard that line before? I said calmly. Let me think. Oh right, Brian's wife. That's exactly what she said when you wrecked her marriage. Anna went completely still. The fire in her eyes flickered. You. How do you know that? Her voice trembled now. I know more than you think, I said. But I'm not here to argue. I'm offering you a clean break. Let's end this like civilized people. Sign the papers, and we're done. She pressed her lips together, silent. I could see the hesitation in her eyes. She knew I was her last lifeline. The rumors about her were everywhere, circulating through the hospital halls like wildfire. The nurses gossiped about her relentlessly. Her name had become a punchline. No one from her family had come to visit, not even her parents. And she knew damn well Nate wouldn't lift a finger for her now. She had no money, no income, and no sympathy left in the world. But she wasn't going to let go that easily. Sign it, I snapped, slamming the document in front of her. I won't. She grabbed the paper and tore it in half. I smiled faintly. I figured you'd try that. I reached into my bag and pulled out another copy. I printed 1,000 of them. You'll run out of energy before I run out of copies. She stared at me, stunned, as I pulled a pair of medical scissors from the tray and knelt beside her. Your wound's not fully healed, is it? I imagine even a little pressure would hurt like hell. And with that, I began cutting away the bandages on her leg. What are you doing? Anna looked up at me in terror, her voice shaking. Finally. She was scared. She was just now realizing what kind of man I truly was. That behind the quiet smiles and polite facade, I had always been a ruthless player. But if I weren't that kind of man, how else would I have carved out a fortune so young, surviving corporate warfare while others burned out before they even got started? You still have a choice, I said calmly, holding the scissors in one hand and tapping the divorce papers with the other. Sign now, and save yourself a bit of pain. Keep dragging this out, and no one's going to hear you scream. Anna had always been terrified of pain. Even a flu shot could send her into tears. I pressed the tip of the scissors straight into the still raw wound on her leg. She screamed, a piercing, guttural sound that echoed off the hospital walls. Sweat poured down her face, her whole body trembling with agony. I stood there, smiling. Want to keep going? And no. I'll sign. I'll sign. Her hand shook as she scrawled her signature. I didn't even bother looking at the name before grabbing one copy and tossing it right at her chest. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. When I left the hospital, Henry was already waiting outside the entrance, pacing nervously. I told the police everything they needed. You promised, you wouldn't tell my dad, right? I patted him gently on the shoulder. You did me a huge favor. Of course I won't throw you under the bus. He looked at me with gratitude in his eyes. But Henry was still too young, too naive. He hadn't yet learned that businessmen don't deal in sentiment, only leverage. That afternoon, I dropped a thick envelope onto the desk in front of Brian's wife. She eyed it coldly. What do you want? A piece of land on the south side of the city, I said smoothly. Fair trade, for your son's future. That plot has been in competitive bidding for half a year, she scoffed. You think I'd just hand it over without profit? Shame, I said, tapping the folder. Because in a few days, the story of your son crippling a classmate in a bullying incident is going to be everywhere. I discovered it in his messages with Anna. Turns out, Henry was a notorious bully at school. He'd gotten away with it because of who his father was. And one incident, an accident, officially, had left a boy permanently disabled. The school had covered it up, called it a freak mishap. But Henry hadn't been able to stomach the guilt. He'd vented everything to Anna. Which meant I now had it all, screenshots, confessions, cover-up records. And that wasn't the only skeleton in his closet. Don't push your luck, Brian's wife hissed. Your wife wasn't exactly innocent either. I let out a low chuckle. What's so funny, she snapped. Oh, nothing, I said, still grinning. Just wondering how you've got the energy to worry about my marriage when your husband's mistress is 6 months pregnant and practically decorating your guest room. Her face darkened. She knew. And she knew I knew everything, from Anna, of course. Fine, she said through clenched teeth. I'll sign the land agreement tomorrow morning. But I want every single piece of evidence turned over to my attorney. Originals. Of course. That's why you're a class act, ma'am. I knew you'd make the smart move. I strode out with a smile. The next day, I walked away holding title to the most coveted development land in the city. And word spread fast. Clients who had once spent months negotiating with Brian were furious. We gave your family millions, why the hell is he getting the land? Refund our investment. Give us our money back. The protests snowballed. Developers started knocking on doors, lawyers started calling. And I heard rumors that complaints had already been filed with higher authorities. Brian's empire was crumbling from within. And I hadn't even lifted a finger. 3 years later. Mr. George, here's today's contract for your review. I sat comfortably in my office, sipping tea without a care in the world. My company had gone public earlier this year. Thanks to that prime piece of real estate I secured back then, I had transformed myself into the most powerful developer in the city, now steadily rising to a top-tier enterprise at the state level. Some even say I owe it all to Brian's downfall. And they wouldn't be entirely wrong. After all, I made sure the truth got out. It started when Anna was still in the hospital. I quietly decrypted all her devices and files. That's when I found the video, Anna and Brian, tangled in bed. Turns out, she had once used it to blackmail him too. But when Brian's wife found out, she nearly destroyed Anna for it. The moment that recording landed in my hands, I knew exactly what to do. I didn't keep it to myself. I passed it along to a few influential developers. Within days, news of Anna's affair with Brian spread like wildfire. The scandal was everywhere. Anna couldn't handle the heat. She wheeled herself onto the rooftop of the hospital and, under the crushing weight of public shame, threw herself off. After her death, all her assets were frozen and liquidated to pay off compensation claims. Her parents were bled dry, left with nothing. Just a few days ago, I passed by two homeless beggars on the street. At first glance, they looked a lot like her mother and father. Maybe it was them. Maybe it wasn't. Didn't really matter. What mattered was this: I had clawed my way out of that toxic, festering marriage. And now I was back, stronger, smarter, sharper. Even when beautiful women crossed my path now, I never looked twice. Because I've learned the hard way. The more beautiful a woman is, the more dangerous she tends to be. Second story. Caught my wife cheating on Valentine's Day. She filed for divorce after getting pregnant. I signed the papers with a smile, but then she came crawling back in a wheelchair, begging for a second chance. "Anna, why are you calling a rideshare for such a short distance?" I asked casually, catching a glimpse of her phone screen. I wasn't trying to snoop, it just happened to catch my eye. Her office was only a few blocks away, she usually walked there. "Why are you looking at my phone?" she snapped, tilting the screen away from me. "The company's sending me out of town today. It's a longer trip. You want me to walk there or what? If you could afford a car, maybe I wouldn't have to take rideshares all the time." Her tone was sharp, defensive. I raised an eyebrow. "I thought we agreed to save up for a house first. That's what we've been planning, right?" I hadn't expected such a hostile response from a simple question. "Well, maybe that's just your excuse for being broke," she shot back, slipping on her heels and applying lipstick. "It's been years, and I've yet to see a single cent of that so-called savings." With that, she slammed the door and left. Anna usually got off work earlier than I did, but that night, she never came home. In fact, she was gone the entire night. Out-of-town business for a local branch office? It didn't quite add up. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe I was just overthinking. We both came from modest families, so saving money meant grinding hard. I had always worked my tail off. My performance at the company had not only met expectations, it had exceeded them. Management was already preparing to promote me. I'd planned to tell Anna on Valentine's Day, surprise her with the news. I even made dinner reservations in advance. On Valentine's Day, we sat down at a cozy, upscale restaurant. As she glanced at the menu, her eyebrows lifted. "Wow, this place is pricey. What's the occasion?" "Not the restaurant you would choose." I smiled mysteriously. "Well, what's the point of making money if I can't spend it on you? I've got something to tell you later, you're going to love it." "Oh, Anne. Happy Valentine's Day." I pulled out a bouquet of red roses from behind my chair. But instead of smiling, Anna scowled and tossed the flowers onto the floor. The petals scattered all over the place. "Can you stop giving me useless crap? These things wilt in a few days, what's the point?" I stared at the crumpled flowers on the floor, my chest tightening. "I thought you'd like them." She let out a mocking laugh. "Other men buy their wives' cars, houses. At the very least, it's jewelry or designer bags. And you? You bring me a bunch of flowers like I'm some lovesick teenager. Being married to you is a damn punishment. I'm not rich like those men, but I'm doing everything I can to build a better life for us." She pushed back from the table. "Yeah? All I see is talk. I don't see results." Then she walked off toward the restroom, leaving her phone behind on the table. I sat there, staring at the screen. Something inside me shifted. Call it instinct, call it something darker, but I picked up her phone. I opened the rideshare app. Her trip history was full of rides to the same high-end residential complex. A few hotel stops in between. My heart sank. Could she really be? I opened her social media app and saw a message thread with a contact listed only by a phone number, no name. That alone raised a red flag. Curious, I tapped it open. The messages were still there, either she hadn't had time to delete them, or there were just too many to keep up with. They met often. Very often. And the address? That luxury apartment complex, the guy lived there. Then I clicked on his profile. My stomach dropped. It was her boss. The same boss I'd heard was married. So not only was Anna cheating on me, she was the other woman in someone else's marriage. I had poured everything I had into this marriage. Every ounce of energy, every dollar, every moment was for our future. And yet, her heart had already been given to someone else. No wonder she'd been so short-tempered lately. I felt the rage boil inside me. "You're snooping through my phone again? God, you're such a control freak." I was gone for 5 minutes and you couldn't wait to dig into my private stuff? Anna slapped me across the face. I stood there, trembling, staring at the screen full of messages, evidence of her betrayal, line after line. If I hadn't checked, I wouldn't have known what kind of garbage you've been up to, I said, voice low, shaking with fury. What about this? How do you explain this? She didn't even flinch. Her face was calm, almost bored. I don't need to explain anything, she said coolly. Since you've already seen it, I might as well just tell you myself. She reached into her purse, pulled out a piece of paper, and tossed it in front of me. I'm pregnant. And I want a divorce. I've been meaning to leave you for a while. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. You're pregnant? I asked, already knowing the answer. It's his, isn't it? You're carrying his child? Anna rested a hand gently on her stomach. Her expression softened into something that might have looked maternal to a stranger, but to me, it was a cruel joke. Of course it's his, she said with a hint of pride. You think I'd have your baby? I'd never let my child grow up in a life like yours. I let out a bitter laugh. So that explains everything. The attitude, the distance. You really think he's going to give you some fairy tale life just because he's your boss? He's married, Anna. You sold your dignity for money. You're not a wife, you're a mistress. Her eyes flared. In love, the person who is not loved is the third party. You wouldn't understand. Talking to you is a waste of my time, she snapped, slamming the divorce papers onto the table. The pen beside it jumped slightly from the force. So just sign it and get it over with. So she was his mistress. No more doubt. The irony was almost poetic. She thought she'd won something, but she had no idea what was coming. That man was a notorious womanizer. She was just his latest fling, a brief thrill. Sooner or later, he'd toss her aside like all the others. Any trace of affection I had for her, any last shred of hope, vanished in that moment. A woman that foolish wasn't worth even an ounce of regret. A promotion, a raise, and now the chance to walk away from a shameless, two-faced wife? This was the best deal I'd ever signed. I'm actually looking forward to seeing how your life turns out, I said with a cold smile, then picked up the pen and signed my name without hesitation. Anna smirked and ran her hand over her stomach again. Don't worry about me. You couldn't afford me even if you tried. She turned toward the window, her smile suddenly bright and radiant, as if this was the beginning of her happily ever after. Then she looked back at me, her voice dripping with disdain. My husband is picking me up. You go ahead and enjoy your dinner. Husband, huh? They weren't even married yet, and she was already calling herself his wife. A mistress pretending to be a queen. No shame, no self-awareness. But I didn't argue. Let her believe whatever she wanted. Because soon, reality would come knocking, loudly. Just then, the dishes I had ordered arrived, lavish entrees I usually wouldn't have splurged on. I picked up my chopsticks and began to eat slowly, savoring each bite in quiet solitude. I thought Anna had already left for good. But to my surprise, she came strutting back in arm with her boss, Henry. They walked straight to my table, like they were putting on a show. Henry didn't waste a second, he reached out and flipped over the dish I was eating. So you're Anna's ex-husband, he sneered. I calmly put down my utensils. Yeah. That's me. Got a problem? He looked me up and down with a smug grin. One look at you and it's obvious, cheap clothes, cheap shoes, pathetic. No wonder Anna suffered so much being married to you. I came here today to put you in your place. Before I could respond, Henry grabbed the bottle of red wine from the table and smashed it against my head. Wine poured down my hair, dripping onto my shirt, soaking my collar. Anna clapped her hands over her mouth, eyes wide in delight. Henry, you're amazing. So bold, so manly. God, you're nothing like that useless loser. I'll show you what it's like to be with the right man, Henry said, grabbing a wine glass and smashing it on my head again for good measure. Then he leaned in, patting my cheek mockingly. You're not a kid anymore. What are you, pushing 35? Probably been scraping by in this city for years, still living like a nobody. Jesus, how did Anna even tolerate you? I bet you don't even have a car. He pulled out his keys and dangled them in front of my face. Take a good look. You'll probably never be able to afford one of these even if you work the rest of your miserable life. I wiped the wine from my face, unfazed. Nice car, I said flatly. But if that's the only thing you have to brag about, that's just sad. You're flaunting money like a teenager. And as for your taste in women, if you like a woman that no one else wants, how good can your aesthetic taste be? Henry's face darkened. When his bragging didn't get the reaction he wanted, he snapped. He flipped the entire table, sending plates, glasses, and food crashing into my lap. Still got something smart to say now? Anna's face turned red with rage. You're the one no one wants. Don't kid yourself, I abandoned you. You didn't abandon me. Understand this. I looked her dead in the eye. Oh really? So you walked away from a decent marriage to become someone's mistress. That's your definition of dignity? Feeling proud about it, are you? Her smile faltered, and I saw the flicker of panic in her eyes. She was the kind of woman who lived for appearances. The kind who needed everyone to think she was perfect. Calling her out in public was her worst nightmare. Why, you'd look bad too if you told everyone, she stammered, trying to regain control. If you really don't care what people think, I said coolly, then go ahead. Tell everyone the truth. Let's see who ends up more ashamed. I've got nothing to hide. But you? You might want to think twice. The truth is, people can still tell right from wrong. A mistress and a cheating wife will never earn sympathy, no matter how pretty the packaging is. You're disgusting, Anna hissed, realizing she'd lost the upper hand. She grabbed Henry's arm and stormed out. But I could see it in her eyes, she wasn't nearly as confident as she pretended to be. And the show wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Word had it Anna had quit her job altogether, now spending her days lounging in one of Henry's other properties, pampered and pregnant. She even sent me several photos, plates of gourmet food, expensive jewelry, luxury trinkets. Life after you is exactly what I dreamed of. Didn't you want to see how I'm living now? Just trying to satisfy your curiosity. It's far better than you could have ever imagined, right? I glanced at the pictures and the messages with nothing but mild amusement. Let her gloat while she could. That kind of lifestyle never lasted long, especially not for someone like her. She could flash all the diamonds and desserts she wanted, but in the end, none of it would be hers to keep. I didn't respond. I simply went back to work. It was the peak of summer, hot, humid, suffocating. One afternoon, I stopped by a local ice cream shop to cool down. I never expected to run into Anna there. She walked in with a small entourage behind her, flaunting her presence like she was walking a red carpet. I chuckled inwardly. That kind of ostentatious display would surely come back to bite her. Sooner or later, Henry's wife would notice. Well, George, she said, spotting me. What a coincidence. I scooped a spoonful of ice cream into my mouth and replied with a smirk, didn't you say your life was all luxury and refinement now? What are you doing in a humble little place like this? Doesn't really suit your elevated status, does it? I usually wouldn't step foot in places like this, she sniffed, waving her hand dramatically. But I just had a craving for this specific flavor that I think this little shop would be honored to have me as a buyer. She dug into the ice cream with exaggerated enthusiasm, clearly putting on a show. From the way she was eating, you'd think she'd never had ice cream before in her life. I couldn't help but scoff inwardly, her body constitution had always been weak, prone to cold and circulation issues. Pregnancy made it worse. She shouldn't have been touching anything that cold. Sure enough, only minutes later, Anna clutched her stomach in agony and doubled over, screaming. My stomach! My stomach, somebody help me. Call an ambulance. As I stood watching the scene unfold like a predictable play, someone walked into the shop, someone I never expected. Anna's face turned ghostly pale in an instant. A sharp, commanding voice cut through the chaos like a blade. With me here, I wonder who among you dares to help her. The entire store went quiet. Anna's scream stopped short. The people who had followed her and began shifting uncomfortably. A few of them immediately walked over to stand behind the woman who'd just entered. Madam, you're here. She's not of madam, Anna said coldly, eyes narrowing at Anna. Anna grabbed the edge of a table, furious and desperate. They're just afraid of you. You think you're so important? Wait until I tell Henry, you'll all be fired. But no one moved to help her. The woman's gaze swept over Anna with razor-sharp precision, finally landing on her belly. Trying to climb the social ladder without looking in the mirror first. You really think carrying his child gives you power? That's bold. She was calm, composed, but every word struck like a whip. I realized then, this must be Daisy, Henry's actual wife. And from the look in her eyes, Anna was about to meet the end of her delusion. You're jealous, Anna spat weakly. You don't have a child. That's why you're threatened by me. I do have his baby, and that makes me more important than you. Daisy tilted her head slightly, amused by Anna's bravado. For Henry, that child is the only reason you're still here. But, she paused, voice turning icy, it seems like you might not have even that for much longer. Anna's expression shifted as if the words hit her physically. Her face twisted in pain again. Blood had begun to pool beneath her chair. The ice cream, the stress, the confrontation, her body couldn't handle it. And now, even the one thing she thought made her indispensable was slipping away. Please, someone help me. Help my baby. You can't just stand there and do nothing. Anna's cries echoed through the ice cream shop, filled with desperation and fear. But the other customers had already figured out what was going on. This wasn't just a medical emergency, this was a showdown between the wife and the mistress. And no one had any sympathy for Anna. Who'd want to help a shameless homewrecker? Someone muttered under their breath. Everyone kept their distance, some even stepping further away. In the end, it was the shop manager, afraid of a lawsuit, who reluctantly called for an ambulance. Meanwhile, Daisy stood calmly amid the chaos, unshaken. Her presence alone commanded the room, and the way she carried herself, elegant, poised, lethal, made it clear she was no ordinary woman. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't even needed to. A few sharp words, and she'd silenced everyone. But one question lingered in my mind: if she saw Henry's true nature so clearly, why hadn't she left him? Was she clinging to the wealth? The status? Was it pride, or just survival? The curiosity slipped from my mouth before I could stop it. You're not even a little angry? She was walking toward the door when my question made her pause. She turned her head, her eyes meeting mine. And you? She asked, her voice calm. As her ex-husband, do you think being angry ever changed anything? I had no answer. Only more questions. How did you know I was her ex-husband? She didn't respond. She simply turned and walked out, leaving silence in her wake. I took a cab to the hospital, fully intending to enjoy the mess Anna had made for herself. When I arrived, she was lying weakly in the hospital bed, an oar in her arm, barely able to keep her eyes open. As soon as she saw me, her face dropped in disappointment. What are you doing here? I don't need you. We have nothing to do with each other anymore. She tried to lift her head but gave up halfway through. I'd already spoken to the doctor. The baby was gone. You flatter yourself, I said coolly. I'm not here out of concern. I just came to watch the fallout. Anna reached for the potted plant beside her and hurled it in my direction, but she was too weak, it landed harmlessly on the floor. You just wait, she spat, gasping for breath. When my husband gets here, he'll make everything right again. You'll be jealous when you see how he treats me. I glanced down the empty hallway outside her room. If he really cared, he'd already be here. Your medical bills are still unpaid, you know. That's none of your business, she snapped. For him, that kind of money is pocket change. Unlike you, if this were your bill, you probably couldn't even afford a band-aid. The level of delusion was almost laughable now. She was clinging to fantasy like it was a lifeline. You haven't noticed? I said quietly. No one's come. Not a single person. Doesn't that tell you something? She bit her lip hard, jaw clenched tight. He's already discarded you, I added. You just haven't accepted it yet. Shut up. This is my life, you don't get to comment on it, you broke loser. I shrugged. Suit yourself. But if no one covers your bill soon, this hospital's going to throw you out on the curb. I'd said everything I needed to. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving her in silence, surrounded by cold walls, empty promises, and the echo of her own pride collapsing. Our company had recently started planning a major project, a high-profile collaboration with a well-known corporate giant. I was selected to represent our team for the negotiations. After exchanging contact info, the representative from their side suggested meeting at a cafe downtown. I arrived early, contract documents neatly tucked into my briefcase, ready to make the best impression. But when the door opened and the representative walked in, I was caught completely off guard. You? It was her, Henry's wife. She gave a composed smile and extended her hand. Nice to see you again. Officially this time. I'm Daisy Rockefeller, representing the Rockefeller Group. I stood up quickly and shook her hand, offering a brief professional introduction in return. After a few polite exchanges, we quickly got down to business. Daisy wasn't the idle, stay-at-home wife I'd once assumed she was. She had sharp insight, a firm grasp of market strategy, and offered perspectives that were both practical and forward-thinking. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, straight to the point, efficient, and surprisingly pleasant. By the time we wrapped up, it was clear the collaboration was practically finalized. She agreed the terms were solid, and both sides stood to benefit greatly. With the formalities handled, I finally allowed myself to relax a little, and curiosity got the better of me. I said quietly, "Are Anna and Henry still in touch?" As soon as the words left my mouth, I realized how personal the question sounded. "I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't have asked. It's none of my business, I was just wondering." Daisy didn't seem bothered at all. She took a slow sip of her coffee and answered plainly, "Henry's the kind of man who lost himself the moment he got a taste of power. The Rockefeller family helped him build his empire, so believe me, we know exactly how to tear it down, too." Her tone remained calm, detached, almost clinical. "Anna was just one of many," she continued. "He discards them all, no exceptions. He used to run a solid company. That was beneficial for us, so I overlooked a lot. But over time, he crossed too many lines, cheating, scandal, interfering in others' marriages. If word ever got out, it wouldn't just ruin him, it would tarnish the Rockefeller name as well." "That's why you waited this long to file for divorce?" Daisy nodded slightly. "Exactly." I leaned back in my chair, letting her words settle. "Without the Rockefeller name behind him, Henry's done for. And Anna," I shook my head, chuckling softly. "She'll have an even harder time surviving on her own." Just thinking about their downfall made my coffee taste a little less bitter. "In a way," I said with a half-smile, "I guess you and I ended up in the same boat." Daisy's lips curled ever so slightly. "Seems that way." We confirmed the contract signing would take place at our company headquarters. The official ceremony was set for a few days later. If this deal went through successfully, the benefits for me would be substantial, not only a generous bonus, but likely a fast track to higher responsibilities and executive favor. This wasn't just a project, it was a turning point. And I intended to rise to the occasion. I went to a tailor the next day and had a custom suit made. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar and smoothing the sleeves, I almost didn't recognize the man staring back at me. A fresh start. A new chapter. The past was behind me. And the future looked sharper than ever. On the day of the signing ceremony, our company's top executives and several representatives from the Rockefeller Group arrived, including Daisy herself. I couldn't lie, I was a little nervous. My right eyelid had been twitching all morning. As the lead on the project, I opened the presentation and walked through the key components of the collaboration. Both sides delivered formal remarks, and everything was proceeding smoothly. Daisy, as the official representative, and a Rockefeller by blood, was naturally the one to sign the agreement. She picked up the pen and was just about to sign when the door burst open. Someone stormed into the room and rushed straight toward me. "George," the woman cried, grabbing onto my arm tightly. "I was blind before, but I see everything clearly now. If you're willing to forgive me, I swear I'll devote myself to you completely. No more lies, no more betrayal." Anna. What the hell was she doing here, still in a wheelchair, no less? "Let go," I said coldly. "Didn't Henry already divorce you? Perfect, now you two can be together. Sounds like a great match to me." "Me? I'm just a poor loser, remember? You said so yourself." I pried her hand off my arm and stepped away. Daisy, composed as ever, didn't flinch. She finished signing the documents, then handed the contract over to me with a calm smile. "I look forward to working with you," she said. "Likewise," I replied, accepting it with a grateful nod. I appreciated how she hadn't let the scene derail anything. Our company executives, sensing the personal drama, took the contracts and tactfully exited the room, leaving only the three of us behind. Anna clung to the sleeve of my suit again, her eyes glistening. "George, you got promoted and didn't even tell me. But it's okay, I know now, and it's not too late. We've only been divorced a few days. We still have history, right? I don't want anything fancy. Let's just go look at houses together. Put my name on the deed, and we'll call it even." I raised an eyebrow. "Anna, you've really got some nerve," I said. "I have zero intention of getting back with you. Why on earth would I want to be with someone who has no moral compass? And even if I did buy a house, what makes you think it has anything to do with you? You're flattering yourself a bit too much. That's okay, she replied quickly, trying to smile through the desperation. Even if you can't meet that condition, I'd still come back, no strings attached. I just want us to be together again. After the accident, the doctors said I'll be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. She placed her hands gently on her knees and began to sob. I was foolish, George. I was blinded by Henry, by status and vanity. But now I know what truly matters, it's you. You're the one I truly love. I couldn't help but laugh. Loudly. This is the rich wife life you dreamed of? I said, eyes glinting with amusement. Unfortunately, life doesn't come with a rewind button. You made your choice. And if you want to whisper sweet lies, go tell them to Henry, I'm not interested. Daisy finally spoke, her tone calm but cutting. Throwing a tantrum won't change anything. You chose betrayal. Now you're just reaping what you sowed. All this drama, it only makes you look more pathetic. Anna snapped her head toward her. And who the hell are you two but into our business? George and I were married, you're just an outsider. What, you get divorced and now you've got your eyes on him? Anna tried to rise, her rage pushing her forward, but reality pulled her right back down. Her legs wouldn't move. Her body betrayed her. And in that moment, she finally realized, she had nothing left to stand on. Not physically, not emotionally, not in this life she'd once so proudly chosen. Without warning, Daisy splashed her glass of water right in Anna's face. You've always been beneath me, then, now, and always. Don't test your luck in front of me. You went too easy on her, I said coldly, watching Anna wipe her soaked face. She didn't even know whether it was water or tears streaming down her cheeks. George. So this is what it is, huh, she said, voice cracking. You've been fooling around with her all along? You two really hit it well. Henry and I had no clue. I guess you're not so different from us after all. And who the hell gave her the right to feel heartbroken? We've only met a few times, I snapped. Unlike you and Henry, we didn't sleep our way through betrayal. Her baseless accusations made my jaw clench. I didn't like the way she dragged Daisy into this. You're right, Daisy said calmly, brushing imaginary dust from her sleeve. I was too gentle. Then a clean, loud slap landed across Anna's face. Security, Daisy called out, turning away, get this woman out of here. Anna panicked, trying to spin her wheelchair around, but no matter how hard she moved, wheels could never match legs. The guards didn't hesitate, they pushed her toward the exit. The front steps of the building were high, too high for her to manage. As she struggled, her wheelchair tilted. She lost her balance and fell hard onto the ground. Not a single person stepped forward to help her. Alone, humiliated, she had to drag her own clumsy, trembling body back into the chair. I won't give up, George, she hissed, her voice shaking. Her persistence didn't make me feel guilty, it terrified me. I was more convinced than ever that divorcing her had been the best decision of my life. I'm sorry you had to deal with that today, I turned to Daisy after things had quieted. Especially since she tried to smear your name too. Daisy straightened my tie slightly, still composed. There's no need to apologize, she said casually. People like her say anything to claw at dignity they never had. I'm not bothered. But I will take you up on that dinner, let's call it a celebration for sealing the deal. Just let me know the time, I smiled. It's the least I can do. Later that night, when I got home, I was surprised to find Anna again, this time, waiting outside my door. Anna, what the hell are you doing here? Are you seriously stalking me now? She looked at me with wide, teary eyes full of fake innocence. I'm not doing anything. This used to be my home, too. Why shouldn't I come back? I just didn't expect you to be so heartless, throwing me out of your company, changing the locks on your door like I'm a stranger. Tell me, George, be honest with yourself, who's really the heartless one here? Anna's voice faltered, as if even she couldn't believe her own words. I pulled out my key and unlocked the door. She shamelessly followed me in. This is my home, I said flatly. You need to leave. I pushed the door halfway closed, but she wedged herself in the doorway, refusing to move. I've lived here for so long. I'm emotionally attached to this place, she said, looking around with forced nostalgia. And to you. Honestly, I've never really let go. Her sentimental act didn't move me in the slightest. Only now that you've lost everything do you suddenly feel attached? You just want someone to wait on you hand and foot, don't you? I'm not your fool anymore. Let it go. If you really love this place so much, I'll transfer the lease to you, for $10,000 a month. You send the money, I'll pack my bags and hand you the keys. She paused, seeing I wasn't playing along. Then she shifted tactics again. Well, what's the point of staying here alone? It's just depressing. Actually, I just remembered, I left some things behind. Can you help me find them? I had no patience left. What is it? I asked coldly. List them now. I'll get them for you, and then you're leaving. She rattled off a long list of items. I found them, one by one, and dumped them unceremoniously into her lap. There. Done. Now get out. She winced as a box grazed her shoulder, covering her head with her arms, trying to act offended without losing her self-pitying tone. George, it's late. It's not safe for me to go back alone. Just let me stay one night, please. Just one. It won't inconvenience you at all. My patience snapped. I shoved her wheelchair toward the door. When the wheels jammed at the threshold, I gave it a hard kick. George. How could you treat me like this? She tumbled out of the chair, hitting the floor hard. Her forehead struck the ground, already turning purple. Don't ever show up here again, I said coldly. You make me sick. If I see you near me one more time, I'm calling the police. I slammed the door shut behind her. Through the peephole, I watched her struggle to get back into her wheelchair and will herself away, pitiful and alone. Only then did I feel the tension in my chest begin to ease. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Daisy. Didn't you say you owed me a dinner? She said with her usual calm tone. I'm free this Thursday at noon. Do you have anything else going on that day? Thursday? Yeah, that's perfect. I've got nothing else planned, I replied quickly. Do you have a favorite restaurant? Feel free to send me the location, I'll meet you there. There's one I like, she said. I'll send you the address in a bit. Sounds good. I wasn't the kind of person who liked being late, so I arrived early and took a seat at the restaurant, waiting for Daisy. She showed up a little while later, slightly out of breath. Sorry, she said. Something came up at the last minute. I hope I didn't keep you waiting too long. As it happened, the dishes were just being served. I had ordered everything based on her preferences, we'd talked about it earlier. I stood and pulled out her chair. Not at all. You're right on time. Come on, you must be hungry, let's eat. The food was fantastic, and the conversation flowed even better. She wasn't the kind of woman who rolled her eyes at business talk, in fact, she enjoyed it. Even discussions about project logistics didn't bore her. We were halfway through dinner, enjoying the evening, when an unexpected figure burst into the restaurant. Henry. He stormed over and slammed his hands on our table, sending plates and glasses crashing to the floor. You selfish bitch, he shouted at Daisy. You destroyed my company, bankrupted me, and now you're here dating another man? No surprise. The man who'd paired up with Anna would naturally have the same distorted view of the world. It was finally time to return the humiliation he once dealt me. Back then, I held back. But not tonight. Watch your mouth, I said coolly. Unless you want me to teach you a better way to speak. I clenched my fist and threw a punch square into his face. He staggered backward, spitting blood. Well, he sneered, holding his jaw. So it's you, George. Guess you climbed your way up by cozying up to a rich woman, huh? Think you can handle that kind of life, you broke little bastard? Daisy looked visibly uncomfortable for the first time. You had your chance, Henry, she said coldly. But you ruined it. You destroyed your own business. I simply stopped covering for you. Honestly, I should have done it a long time ago. Oh, so that's how it is, he snapped, his voice cracking. You pushed me off a cliff, don't expect me to fall alone. If I go down, I'm dragging you with me. His eyes were wild, veins bulging at his neck. Then, suddenly, he pulled a knife from inside his jacket and lunged toward her. Daisy, look out. I shoved her out of the way, but not fast enough. I took the blade to my arm before security tackled him to the ground. Even as they held him down, he thrashed and shouted like a man possessed. You ruined me. You deserve to die with me, you heartless bitch. I stood between him and Daisy, blood running down my arm, but unmoved. I wouldn't let him touch her. Daisy insisted on taking me to the hospital to get the wound treated. It's nothing, I reassured her as the nurse bandaged me up. Just a scratch. I'm a guy, it's my job to protect you. But I really didn't expect Henry to take such action. He's a desperate man, she said quietly. He's lost everything. When people have nothing left, they'll do anything to pull others down with them. I'm sorry you got dragged into it. I gave her a half smile. It's not your fault. You don't need to apologize. Henry was sentenced shortly afterward for aggravated assault. At least for now, Daisy wouldn't have to worry about him anymore. After dropping her off at home, I quietly left. A few days later, my supervisor called me into his office. We're relocating you to headquarters, he said. I thought it was a reward for the project, but then he added, Daisy Rockefeller personally recommended you. She said you have strong leadership potential and deserve greater responsibilities. Of course, when the Rockefeller family wants something, who in the company would dare say no? The promotion came with a pay raise that practically doubled my salary, and with it, far bigger opportunities. Soon, I was boarding a flight to our corporate headquarters. Before I left, I sent Daisy a message. Thank you. She didn't reply in words, but we both understood what happened that day at the restaurant. That was her way of saying thank you, too. Maybe someday, our paths will cross again.